526 seconds for George Floyd. Dr. Martin Glynn, aka Doc Martin. What do you write about, they asked. Many things, I replied. I write about nature, the birds, the trees, the sky, the sea, the wind, the rain and the sun. I write about birds, those vultures who have fed on the ambitions of the black community. Those magpies who have stolen and hoarded the knowledge, treasures, dreams and wonders of the black present and past. Those eagles wearing uniform who prey on black bodies. I write about trees, the trees we used to swing from. The trees that made the gallows. The trees that made the slave ships. The trees that made the slave houses on the plantation. The trees used to make batons that beat black people. I write about the sky that black people look at through the bars of a prison cell. The sky that is looked upon before the execution. The sky that turns from blue to black to red after a police shooting. I write about the sea where slaves were fed to the sharks. The sea that carried convicts who at a later stage convicted indigenous peoples from owning their own land. I write about the wind that carried the message of slavery, colonialism and apartheid, the wind of black oppression, the wind of denied access, the wind of segregation and Jim Crow, the wind of empty promises, the wind of disruption, disobedience and defiance, the wind of change, the wind of no change. I write about the rain that has drowned out our silences, that has washed away our motivation and authenticity, our cultural heritage, our sense of purpose, our sense of place, the rain that has washed out the blood down the drain after Stephen Lawrence's murder and Trayvon's shooting. I write about the sun that has dried out our ambitions, heated our anger, burnt our future, and torched our aspirations. Do you write about social issues, they asked. Of course, I replied. I write about definition and rights and distinction and identity and community and intellectuals and myths and home and time and be and being and ignorance and death. I write about definition, who we are, what we are, why we are, where we are, who they are, what they are, why they are, where they are. I write about rights, the right clothes, the right image, the right status on Facebook, the right books that we don't read, human rights and Malcolm, civil rights and Martin, the right to remain silent, the right to be human, the right to walk freely, the right to exist, the right to coexist, making the right choice, not having the right peace of mind. I write about distinction, independence or assimilation, assertion or apathy, self-love or self-loathing, self-concept or self-interest, ignorance or denial, economic freedom or state dependence, consciousness or compromise, philosophy or ignorance, protest or revolution. I write about identity, on being intelligent inside the wrong complexion, on building pyramids, on creating great civilizations, on walking through the door of no return, on being labelled savage and subhuman, on possessing a soul ripped from its source, on the legacy of our ancestors, on those who came, saw and conquered, on erasing our memories, on deleting our histories, on poisoning our minds. I write about community, the inner city community, the suburban community, the academic community, the black community, the white community, the community with no fathers, the community with police brutality, the community with no knowledge of itself, the community without hope, the community that is heroic and courageous and powerful. I write about intellectuals, those who look on from the margins and not from the centre, those who say race doesn't exist, those who write articles with no reference, those who give lectures with false information, those who hypothesize about black pain, black men, black women and black people, those who never read Du Bois, Garvey and Fanon, those who exclude black women, Those academics who say black knowledge doesn't matter. I write about miseducated, misguided, misdirected, misunderstood, misquoted, misdiagnosed, misrepresented, missed the point. I write about home in the Caribbean, home in Africa, home at the point of a needle, home in a prison cell, home in the ghetto, home where hatred and abuse coexist. Single parent home, children's home, jazz, blues, hip hop and reggae home, going from home to home, never knowing where home is. I write about time, not enough time, not the right time, need more time, ran out of time, didn't have time, don't know time, time's run out time, not on time time to go time. I write about be, what should be, could be, must be, will be, might be, never will be, should be, can never be, what must be, what will be. I write about being us, being me, being you, being a couple, being a partnership, being together in strength, being a collective, being aware, being in love, just be. I write about ignorance of who we are, ignorance of who they are, ignorance of where we've come from, ignorance of where we're going, ignorance of how we're going to get there, ignorance of what we want, ignorance of how we're going to get it. I write about death by mass incarceration, death in police custody, death on the streets, death by electrocution, death by lethal injection, death by kneeling on a black man's neck. I write about seconds, 526 seconds on George Floyd's neck, 526 seconds that unleashed a movement, 526 seconds that made us cry, 526 seconds that woke us up, 526 seconds where we couldn't breathe, 526 seconds, that's all it took, where George Floyd was treated as second best, where George Floyd was treated as a second-class citizen. What will you write about in the future, they asked. You need to write that chapter, I replied. But what can we do, they asked. Kneel for 526 seconds, I replied. George Floyd, rest in power. The struggle continues.